Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special PJTV interview. I'm your host, Stephen Cruiser. Today's guest is my good friend Michael Walsh, who is a best-selling author, journalist, screenwriter, longtime PJ Media contributor, and renowned critic. In his new book, The Devil's Pleasure Palace, Michael discusses how critical theory gained traction in America and the effect it has had on our society. Hello, Michael. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Stephen. It's great to be here.
Great to see you. You make the point that America post-World War II adopted many of its cultural ideals from Europe, and many of these ideas flowed forth from the Frankfurt School and its critical theory philosophy. Can you go into detail, elaborate on what the Frankfurt School is and how it's affecting American society?
Sure. Frankfurt School was this group of German philosophers, mostly Germans, who fell afoul of the Nazis, and they fled to the United States. So they found a new home at Columbia University in Manhattan. But they were cultural Marxists, very dedicated Marxists, and also dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization as we know it. So what they decided to do was launch a multi-pronged attack on things like the family, faith, language. The political correctness comes out of this. All these buzzwords like diversity and tolerance and these various shibboleths, they use that as tools to get at the larger society, and they've been extremely successful. The most famous of their disciples is Saul Alinsky, of course, who begat Hillary Clinton, who begat Barack Obama. So that's where we are. When you want to know how we got here, go back to these guys.
So you're saying that the Democratic National Committee actually was formed in Germany?
Essentially, yeah. Well, we're living with the consequences of German left-wing cultural Marxism that got transplanted to the United States. And the key was they did it through the universities. The famous Long March through the institutions, they invented that. So, you know, certainly when I was in college in the 60s, you began to hear about Herbert Marcuse and Wilhelm Reich and Theodor Adorno and all these philosophers, and their thoughts got into the bloodstream, and now we live with it every day. Everything we discuss now in the context, political context, is basically this cultural Marxist framework. We've adopted their own terms for the debate. That's why we lose.
And we've got what they really started to get a stranglehold on the universities in the 70s, and in the 80s it just became the norm. They completely controlled American education. Now, let's go off on a little tangent here. How do you think we can combat, because this is something I've wrestled with, talked about, written about quite a bit, is, you know, you've got these impressionable 18-year-old kids in college who think that everything that the professor says is gospel, and you have all of these pseudo-Marxists. I mean, they're big capitalists when it comes to selling their own textbooks or anything. Oh, yeah, they love the 10-year money. Yeah. They love everything else.
And
so
those
they're not
nice Mercedes-Benzes.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So, but how do we purge these people?
Well, first of all, you're going to have to let that pig go through the python. I mean, you've got all these people who were, you know, we used to make fun of them, I remember in the late 60s, early 70s, the eternal graduate student. Well, they're now the eternal professor with tenure who's never going to get fired and is going to keep doing this until he or she finally croaks. But we have to replace them with what used to be, which is the old culture. As I said, I wasn't kidding. This really is a book about poetry. It's a book about Paradise Lost by Milton. It's a book about Faust by Goethe. It's a book about Schubert's opera, The Devil's Pleasure Palace, where I got the title. Cool title, by the way. We need to be grounded again in the cultural verities that have been assaulted by critical theory. Critical theory says, let's tear everything down. So now you've torn it down, now what? And they go, I don't care. Here we are.
So is this the kind of thing where we're just going to have to hit absolute rock bottom and scrape it with our fingernails before we can do anything?
Yeah,
or
I think so.
So we have to completely just bottom out and hit the point of ruination.
How much more ridiculous can it get? You know, you've followed all this stuff on Twitter about the social justice warriors. Yeah. And we're in an insane time now. It's got to burn itself out. We've got to start over again.
I think one thing that might help us a lot is the fact that college costs too much now. If we can just get fewer kids going to college, we might be safer in the long run.
Yeah, well, Glenn Reynolds has certainly written about the higher education bubble. Yeah. And who wants to spend, what, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year now to send their kid to college? Do you? No. Yeah, I didn't, certainly when my kids were headed that way.
Rather expensive for places that are being run by wealth distribution people.
Well, especially when you consider that the college tuition alone, which you need to make much more than that before tax to pay for it, is higher than the median income in the United States. These people are always screaming about, you know, wealth inequality and minimum wage. Put your kid through college on the minimum wage, right?
explain to some of our viewers. I mean, most of the viewers here probably do know of Alinsky. Maybe though they don't know exactly what he did or how he started this or what his rules are and the things that Barack Obama is a big devotee of his. I mean, explain a little bit about Saul Alinsky for the people who may not be completely aware of what he did.
Okay, Saul Alinsky came out of Chicago. He actually had run with the Capone mob as a kid. So, as I say about the left, they're the unholy offspring of 30s gangsters and 60s Marxists. And Alinsky kind of embodies that. And his idea, through community organizing, was to attack, attack, attack. Remember, the left never stops. I like to say they never stop, they never sleep, they never quit. They're always on the attack because they have nothing to defend. We're in this odd position of being the guys in the castle with a relentless horde of attackers. We can never defeat them. So Alinsky would organize workers. I remember Alinsky from my early college days. He had just been in Rochester, New York, and organized some action against Kodak, which was the biggest employer in Rochester at that time. And Alinsky was the mouthpiece for these theories of the Frankfurt School of critical theory, and Hillary Clinton wrote her Wellesley Senior thesis about Saul Alinsky, and it's called "There Is Only the Fight." You know how the left is always fight, 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 fight? I think Hitler said Kampf, but it's similar, very similar. They like to see themselves as the heroes against the evil power structure. But what if the power structure is not evil in the first place? We don't defend the power structure, and we just give up. Well, especially the Republicans, they just give up.
Yeah. Well, and now in academia, they are the power structure. And in so many places in America and in government for a lot of those years, they're the man.
They're the man. Yeah.
And so
but they're still fighting the man.
They're still fighting the man. So you got a lot of cognitive dissonance going on with them, where they're dealing with that kind of angst.
Right.
They're fighting themselves. So solutions. What do you? Where do you think when we do bottom out? What do we do then?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I'm getting more radical, especially as I get older. I'm getting more radical on this. I think maybe not send your kid to college for starters, to one of these indoctrination factories. We can go back to the ground springs of Western culture, and recognize that they are good things. That morality is good, and that's how we fight them. First principles. That's
you start talking like that, and everybody acts like you've just risen from some kind of like you're just okay, good, whatever, old man. That's what you start talking about stuff like that.
Right,
even 20-somethings who talk like that, people think, well, what are you, 90? You can't talk about stuff like that anymore. You certainly can't talk about it in school. It just seems so simple once in a while. In America, the fixes are so simple. We've got the constitutional framework, and we don't avail ourselves of the easy way out of things.
Well, I'll tell you,
vote better.
What I say in this book, Steve, is simple. There is a narrative. It's the heroic narrative, which is in every culture, every person. I am the hero of my own life. I am on a quest, and I have a place to go. And the anti-narrative is you're worthless, you're a member of the collective, you're an ant in the ant farm. How can we not sell our own heroic narrative, which is in every story we tell and is part of every religious faith tradition, but we give up the field to these nihilists? It's ridiculous.
I want to, I'm where you're at, as you well know, on most of these things. And every once in a while, I'll meet like 20 young people, 20-somethings, who didn't get polluted by their professors, and that's what still gives me hope. Because people aren't naturally this way. No, this is why what you're writing about here. There had to be a system in place because people aren't naturally as awful as what critical theory has turned out.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the saddest things that was ever said to me was by one of my former students after I gave a lecture on something and used lots of references in cultural frame, biblical, art, whatever, that was just part of what I was talking about. She came up to me afterwards, this is journalism school, and she said, "You make me feel so stupid." And I said, "You're not stupid, you're ignorant. Ignorant I can fix, stupid I can't fix." And then she said, "No one ever told us we had to know these things." So they're so used to growing up in a check-the-box system of education. But when you open their minds to the rich world of Western culture, then they go, wow, I never knew this existed before. That's the bulwark against these people. They use ignorance as a weapon against us.
Michael, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Steve.
For everyone here at PJTV, I'm Stephen Cruiser, and thank you so much for watching today.